A few years ago, I shamefully admitted, like many gamers out there, that I was woefully ignorant of the coin genre. I mean, I have a lot of games that have coins, and I understand the fundamental concept of stamped currency, but, what does that have to do with games, yo? And thus, I conducted my review and entry point into the series of GMT's Coin, or Counterinsurgency series of games, with Colonial Twilight, a beefy and fascinating historical game that, while I developed a deep reverence for, I ultimately concluded was a bit too heady and esoteric for my typical gaming palate. Well, since then, there have been numerous more approachable games that have been compared to or even cited the Coin series as their inspiration, but it wasn't until GMT's own A Gest of Robin Hood that, like the benevolent, if a bit shady redistribution of Nottingham's wealth at the hands of the titular folk hero, that Coin was given to the masses. Counterinsurgency might not immediately evoke thoughts of medieval Britain, but King Richie is off crusading, and under his petulant brother Prince John, the tyrannical Sheriff of Nottingham is ruling with a full belly and an iron fist. Which would be great if not for a band of merry, green-tided men led by Robin Hood, who uses subterfuge, skullduggery, and some light treason to bring the sheriff and his cronies to heel. In Jest, two players take on these opposite sides, playing a tug-of-war between justice and order. Each round, a card is drawn from a semi-randomized deck, and players each take one turn, until one of the two royal inspection cards are revealed, resetting pieces, breaking some merry men out of jail, and awarding bonus justice or order based on the temperament of the regions in play. Then eventually, the bottom card is King Richard's return, with the final doling out of judgment, and whichever side the track favors wins. The thing is, justice and order are a precarious position, and while they generally straddle a line, if one side teeters too far in one direction, an early end will be called during royal inspection, with that side snagging victory. So, clearly, your objective is to try and get the token on the track to push towards your team's favored side of justice or order, but it's the action system ripped straight from coin games of yore that makes everything so juicy. See, each normal round, the card that's revealed is a hypothetical event with a favorable outcome for either player, but it doesn't immediately resolve. Then, starting with the player who has the first initiative, they get to make one of three selections. They can conduct a singular plot, which is one of the actions that's available to their side and their side only, detailed on their player mat, usually moving some units or populating the board with some more units, but there's a little bit of nuance in there. Or they can choose to activate the card in their favor, or they can take plots and deeds, where they can take a single plot in up to 3 locations and conducting one of the heavily thematic deeds, such as revealing Robin among his merry men to make a region revolt, or the sheriff riding in force to suppress the population, allowing more flexibility and control for either side. Then the other player takes one of the 2 remaining selections, after which a new card is flipped, and you repeat again and again. And you might be like, what's the deal? Why should I do anything other than plots and deeds if they're so powerful? It's the obvious decision. And you may be right, but the rub is that the cards have really potent effects that can be big disruptions to the game that you might want to capitalize on. And even if the situational benefit isn't something that is very impactful for you right now, if you don't select it, then you're leaving it open for your opponent to activate. Furthermore, the way that the action system works is that if you select plots and deeds as the last action and the other player selects one of the first 2 actions, the leftmost action is the one that becomes the initiative player for the next round. So you're leaving all the leverage for your opponent to take a double turn. And the leverage is everything in this game. This anxious system is so great and such a simple source of so much fret and strategic possibility, but outside of the action system, your biggest constraint is going to be cash. Most plots and deeds either cost or lead to vitally important funding, which can only otherwise be obtained during royal inspection, some occasional events, or the very shameful passing on your action for a turn. Most dynamically, the sheriff can tax a population, causing an otherwise happy region to revolt, placing a carriage on its space, which will plod its way along roads towards Nottingham, where, if unmolested, will reveal and award the holdings to the sheriff and slide England one space towards order. However, a major source of income for the merry resistance is to rob, flipping their cylinders face up, both representing an expended cost in revealing themselves and making them more vulnerable to arrest, which is really dangerous considering Robin has a scant few available pieces to work with. But when the jolly fellows rob, they can target one of these carriages or flip a traveler card with its own low and high risk effects. Then rolling the die and comparing the result plus merry men revealed in the action versus the sheriff's local goons, they either win big or suffer some or sometimes no consequences, unless the carriage was a trap, adding a higher target value and arresting the greens if they fail in their attempt. This is only one of a few core systems in A Gest of Robin Hood, but the marriage of the classic coin structure and the thematic setting work beautifully in concert. Two asymmetric sides vying for power, where one has more troops to call on, more institutionalized strength to capitalize upon, and more income and resources, but they have to be careful about not exploiting the population too much, otherwise they go into revolt, whereas the other side has fewer troops but is able to use subterfuge and underhanded shenanigans to move amongst the local population and take advantage of the unrest that has already been set up by the very act of the sheriff player trying to get more income and necessary resources, trying to expunge any sort of unrest into order. So there's this brilliant back and forth between these two players that works so well within the fable that we all know, the folklore of Robin Hood, but it is so core and emblematic of the concepts that are at play with the classic coin series. There's a playfulness to the game that just works so well, in large part thanks to the cultural levity surrounding Robin Hood as a boisterous and charming folk hero, confounding the savage and brutish law that may get just in the door, where the dour strife of something like colonial Twilight might be a turnoff for some gamers. And the tone suits the cat and mouse strategy too. There's no real combat, just maneuvering of troops to carry out plots and deeds, risking exposure for arrest or trying to present opposition to the other side's plans. Even the arrest of Robin Hood himself, a uniquely stamped merryman, which yes is an important piece to maintain face down, hidden among your merrymen only to be used selectively, or in the case of the sheriff, to be found and seized upon when he's revealed, has an adorably named counteraction swashbuckle to break him out of jail. Robin does not truck with unbuckled swash. One thing that I want to make clear though, in spite of all of my pontificated adulations, this is still not a simple game. I mean, heck, even with a detailed learn-to-play book that goes over your first several turns of a hypothetical game that you could carry on from there, and a comprehensive rules of play book full of citations and indexes and images, a playbook that goes over the historical background of the game, your player mats that go over all of your plots and deeds in a pretty comprehensive way, as well as a really fascinating and wonderfully put together rules reference on the back of your player shield that has pretty much everything that you're going to need to reference in the game, it can still feel opaque. And it's not because the actions of the game are particularly complex. It's because there are no really strategically obvious moves, which is great for the overall depth and feeling of flexibility and maneuverability and tactics in the game. But if you're just learning, it can feel somewhat rudderless if you're not willing to experiment and try and fail to figure out what are good things you can capitalize on as you're getting your bearings with this pretty nuanced system. There's a level of why you do what you do that can only be grokked through failure, which means that this is a game that both rewards repeated plays and can feel exceptionally lopsided without players on equal footing. And it doesn't help that the one rules reference you could most use, a full detailed copy of your opponent's plots and deeds, is the one thing the game doesn't provide, which is annoying.
Hey, Robin, can you tell me if your sneak action is a plot or deed? And if so, does it cost any money? No reason, just asking for a friend.
Even still, this game manages to carve up this iconic system into digestible chunks with wit and levity, finally balancing strategy with random disruptions that still require deliberate intervention to activate. A Gest of Robin Hood is so good and a worthy consideration for the coin curious and the veteran wargamer alike. And that is our review, but let me know, have you played coin games in the past or those games that have cited coin as their inspiration? What was your initial impression of them, and have you tried a Gest of Robin Hood to make a comparison for yourself? Put it in the comments below. And as always, thanks for watching, thanks for supporting, thanks for being such an awesome community. You know that I've been Jack for the Cardboard Herald.